So here's the deal. Jim Cornette, the legendary Jim Cornette. You guys know sometimes he is known for being pretty outspoken about indie wrestling and wrestling in general. And I want to talk about this because this was a very interesting thing. He buried the AEW roster, and he did it in a huge way. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Tony or Anthony, and this is Destination Pro Wrestling. And I'm excited, man, because pro wrestling has been on fire. This is like some really interesting news because Jim Cornette buried the AEW roster. And I think this was expected from a guy like Jim Cornette, but let's talk about it. So basically what happened was Newsweek, if you guys don't know that website, they published this whole thing with Jim Cornette. And basically he talked about why tag team wrestling isn't a big concern to Vince McMahon. And basically one of the things that he goes on to say is Vince McMahon doesn't like tag teams, and he doesn't like the way it's presented, and he's all about making individual stars. Fair. That's pretty fair. Like, I can see why Vince McMahon would feel that way. I don't think that's like illogical, if that makes sense. But then he kind of talks about how Ring of Honor has done a really good job with tag teams, and obviously the Young Bucks becoming popular and stuff like that. But then it gets to the point where later on in this article, it goes on to a point where Jim Cornette does in fact bury AEW's roster. And one of the things that he says specifically, and I quote, "The talent roster they've been announcing so far, half of them I'm like, yeah. And then half of them I'm like, who? I don't think they can feature something for everybody without losing a lot of people in the process." He said, You need some that people will know, just so that when they know a guy is there, like with Jericho, he's a wrestling star. If he's in there with a guy from China that he's never seen before, I don't know if either of them are stars or not. Jericho is without question the biggest star in AEW and one of the biggest stars in all of wrestling. More impressive, Jericho has managed to stay relevant and exciting well into his 40s. Keep in mind, Jericho is 48 years old. Cornette is hard-pressed to think of another modern wrestler that's managed to have that same kind of trajectory post the age of 40. He cites a couple other wrestlers. It's a combination of that he's great at it, and he was good enough to begin with to afford himself that opportunity. He didn't just have to take every VFW half bingo signing that came along, so I've been proud of Chris. Now, this is really interesting because he's giving props to Chris Jericho, rightfully so. Chris Jericho is a huge star, but one of the things that I really don't like is how he really, he has his doubts. It even says he has his doubts that AEW roster can provide the kind of recognition the promotion needs to succeed long term. And this is where it gets really interesting. On some level, people might catch that for free on television, but whether it would lead to them emotionally or financially investing in tickets or pay-per-views or merchandise past the indie niche level remains to be seen. He said, if they want to play it seriously, then they need an antagonist for the Young Bucks, which makes sense. Because they're not really bringing in many big names, I kind of get where he's coming from. But at the same time, too, a lot of these guys on the AEW roster, they aren't going to be popular WWE guys. And I've accepted that, being with AEW and seeing what AEW is doing. I've accepted the fact that they may not have WWE guys. And I actually commend them for that because we kind of saw what happened with Impact and ROH, kind of riding on the guys who left WWE. Now, it's weird that he credits Chris Jericho, which, like I said earlier, rightfully so. But then he goes on to admit that he really doesn't. Basically, it sounds like he's admitting that he doesn't know half of these people on the roster. Now, I can't see a problem with that because a lot of people will tend to hate the idea that AEW would, in fact, bring in, Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins. Like, a lot of people will hate on that. A lot of people hate on the idea that WWE guys would leave and go to AEW. I've seen it in the comments here on the channel, and I get that. So the two sides to the argument, a lot of people think WWE guys shouldn't go to AEW, but on another hand, Jim Cornette is basically saying this is a bunch of nobodies, and they're not going to succeed because of that. And I have to disagree because this is an opportunity for AEW to create a product that's an alternative. They've already come out and said we're not competing with WWE. They said we're going to do our own thing. We're going to be a sports-centric pro wrestling company. And I love that. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think if you're AEW, you will succeed in this case. A lot of people don't realize that Bellator TV ratings are far greater than UFC's TV ratings. Now, where UFC dominates Bellator is pay-per-view. And these two companies coexist. They both put on pretty good shows. Why can't WWE and AEW do the same? And I think they could. And I think this is where I truly believe Cornette is wrong in a sense that, yeah, they do need antagonists for the Young Bucks. Yeah, they need a popular tag team. But in a long-term project, which I feel is what AEW is, I think it is going to be a long-term development. I think they can develop that. I think they can. And that's where I have to disagree with Cornette. I think, Cornette is definitely a legend, and I think sometimes, his opinions could be taken a little bit differently, and I think a lot of people may disagree. And there's some things that we could disagree on. But that right there, to me, says that AEW is not trying to just out of nowhere come up with an incredible tag team to go up against the Young Bucks. Like, we might see the formation of tag teams. We might see random guys put together. That's going to really depend on how AEW does talent development. Now, there's been rumors that Arn Anderson could finally find a way out of WWE and go into AEW. And, we know that he's out of WWE, and now we know there's a way for him to possibly go. There's an entrance ramp for him. It's just whether or not they come to a deal, right? Arn Anderson has experience with WWE. Like, he knows he's a legend. Like, this guy has a mind for wrestling. If you're AEW and you're throwing allegedly, $1 million a year for Jim Ross, Arn Anderson, get these veterans to develop talent. And then you solve your problem. You solve your problem pretty easily. And I think that's a great thing. I think, they can pair some random guys together. I think they have some stuff going on with, AAA. If it's a sport-centric program, then finding the perfect antagonist for the Young Bucks don't really matter, But the fact that he doubts AEW's roster, for getting them recognition, yeah, initially it's going to be an issue for AEW. And if you don't see that, honestly, you're clueless. Because AEW, unless they start announcing some new WWE guys or Impact guys, they're going to struggle. Now, one thing that could be really beneficial to AEW, which we don't know if it's going to happen, but a partnership with New Japan, Ring of Honor, or Impact. I think it could work. I think it could be successful. I personally want to see Impact and AEW work together. Me personally. If I had it my way, Scott D'Amore and Don Callis, like, these guys are great masterminds in the wrestling world. Like, AEW could benefit off that. And from what it sounds like, even though Impact has low TV ratings, it sounds like they're doing really well as a company, and it's probably the best it's been in several years. Partnership could work out great. We're kind of in the midst of the new indie/territory days. People forget that NWA still exists, with Magnus carrying around the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. So with something like that, with him holding that belt, AEW doesn't have to be exclusive anymore. Like, we've kind of gotten to the point where we believe that it is a different niche. We know that AEW is going to hold more indie talent, and a lot of these guys are going to work between MLW and other companies. So if you're AEW, maybe your AEW World Champion goes to other promotions. Maybe it's not bad for Cody Rhodes to win the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, go on to Impact, and lose it to a guy like Killer Kross. Maybe that's like what AEW needs. Maybe this is the reinvention of the territory days, but with them working with indie companies. And that's something that WWE isn't doing. And it's an alternative. And the best part about that alternative is you don't have to pick between WWE or AEW. But I find it really interesting that he would go so quickly to bury the roster of AEW. I mean, honestly, it's only been a couple months since it's been announced. We're still waiting for their first ever show to take air on pay-per-view, which is Double or Nothing. And I'm excited to go to Double or Nothing because I am going to something fresh, something brand new, something totally different. And I think that's going to be a really, really good thing. And the wrestling world needs that. So the wrestling world needs something different. It needs something fun. And, I'm going to be there at the very beginning. If AEW flops, if AEW is not successful, hey, at least they tried. They got Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega. If these guys don't last, guess what? The best part is there's WWE, there's New Japan, there's Impact, there's Ring of Honor, there's many places. It's not like one company is the end all or be all. So My name is Tony from Destination Pro Wrestling, guys. A little bit of interesting news. Him burying the AEW roster. I don't know why he did it, but he did it. And that's something that Jim Cornette did. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you guys agree or do you disagree? And just let us know in the comment section down below. And as always, make sure you guys click that subscribe button and click that like button. We'll be doing some live shows going forward. Don't know when exactly, but I'll put a poll in the community tab on the channel. So we'll kind of get everybody engaged and see what everybody wants. But I think it'd be a good idea. Do some live content, get you guys rolling on the channel. I want to feature you guys on the channel. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'll talk to you guys soon. And thank you guys for watching. As always, make sure you guys click that like button and subscribe.